Hello, welcome to a special edition of the Leaders in Cleantech podcast here in Prague. I'm delighted to be joined by our guest, Uri Levine, who is the founder of not one but two unicorns. He's considered a serial entrepreneur, investor, author of this fantastic book, Fall in Love with the Problem, Not the Solution, which we'll talk about in a moment. But Uri, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
It's good to have you here. So we were talking before, this is not quite your first trip to Prague. Waze in the early days was very successful here in Prague.
It turns out that Prague was one of the first cities that was very successful.
Right.
Initially in 2010, it was actually only successful in about 4 countries, and Czech Republic and Slovakia was 2 of them.
A nice springboard for what was an amazing journey, right?
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I'm going to embarrass myself slightly here by trying not to be sycophantic, but the book, by the way, and often on the podcast, as you know, we share and make book recommendations, but this really is fantastic. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're looking to be an entrepreneur, everything in there from ideation to fundraising right the way through to exit. So, which you've obviously enjoyed more than once.
So Steve Wozniak, co-founder of Apple, called this book the Bible for entrepreneurs, and when I first sent him, the first few chapters, he told me, I wish I had that when I started. Because when I wrote this book, what I had in my mind is that can I really create a cookbook for entrepreneurs to increase their likelihood of being successful, and at the same time, fulfilling my destiny of sharing the knowledge, sharing the know-how with other entrepreneurs and help them to become more successful.
Yeah. Because that's one of the key things, isn't it? One of the reasons to start the podcast was to get entrepreneurs to share stories, because it's so hard, right? It's so hard to found a business, to take it to any form of success, let alone to an IPO or to a huge exit like you've enjoyed.
And this, it's a long journey, right? And occasionally people ask me, can you describe the journey? And I say, yeah, I can describe it in 3 different dimensions. It's going to be a long roller coaster journey of failures, and each one of them is really important, right? It's a roller coaster with ups and downs and ups and downs. And look, if you'll tell me that all the businesses in the world have ups and downs, I agree. But the frequency of those when you're building the startups, way higher, right? I think that I owe the best quote here to Ben Horowitz. Ben Horowitz, one of the founders of Andreessen Horowitz venture capital firm, and before that, he used to be a CEO of a startup. And he was asked whether or not he was sleeping well at night as a CEO of a startup, and he said, "Oh yeah, I slept like a baby. I woke up every 2 hours and cried." And that's really the reality, right?
It pretty much is. That's why I've got grey hair, certainly.
Same here. My brother is 2 years older than me, and he doesn't have grey hair. So obviously, this is not about genes. It's about... But let me say the following, right? And this is a journey of failures, right? Which is really important. It's really, really important, because if you're afraid to fail, then in reality, you already failed because you're not going to try. Albert Einstein used to say that if you haven't failed, that's because you haven't tried new things before.
Right.
You're going to try new things, you will fail.
Exactly.
The other conclusion is that if you realize that this is going to be a journey of failure, then the most important thing is to fail fast. Because the faster that you fail, you still have plenty of time to try something else, a different approach, a new version, a different go-to-market strategy, something else to try, until you eventually will figure that out.
Yeah. One of the things that really struck me, Uri, was everybody kind of has this idea of to fail fast and understands that mistakes get made and you can learn from them. But having a culture where, firstly, you accept and embrace those mistakes generally, I think, is tough, and a lot of people fall short. But you go even beyond that, saying that the journey is by definition a series of failures. You have a hypothesis, you test, you fail, you change your hypothesis, you test, you fail continually.
Exactly, because this is the journey, right? At the end of the day, look, the difference between a corporate and a startup is the corporate knows this is our market, this is our product, this is our pricing, this is our customers, this is what we are doing, right? The startup knows absolutely nothing, right? So we are going to discover what is our product value proposition, and we are going to figure out our product. And then we'll need to figure out our business model, and then we'll need to figure out our growth strategy and so forth, and then we become a corporate, right? And each one of them is going to be a long roller coaster journey of failures, right? And so you're in an experimental mode all the time until you become a corporate.
But this is really interesting, because a lot of people assume when they're seeking an investment, they have to have the business plan, which of course you do, but you have to know your product market fit. You have to know your your customer experience, expectations. You have to know your business model, all of these things. But in your book, you talk about phases of the business, and they don't necessarily have to run concurrently. There are phases you have to go through independently sometimes.
Absolutely. So look, all of those journey of all the startups will start with figuring out product market fit. And it's very simple. If you don't figure out product market fit, you will die. As simple as that. Actually, you never heard of a company that did not figure out product market fit. They simply died. That's it. When you think about companies that did figure out product market fit, then for a second, I want you to think of, all the applications that you're using every day, from, WhatsApp or searching Google or using Waze or Netflix or Uber or whatever it is, and ask yourself, what is the difference between any of those that you are using today and the first time that you have used that? And the answer is that there is no difference. So product market fit is about creating value to your customers. Once you do that, you don't change that anymore. Getting there is a matter of years, right? It was 5 years for Microsoft. It was 4 years for Waze. Okay. It was 10 years for Netflix. It's a long journey to get
the true product market fit.
Exactly. And there is only one metric for product market fit, which is retention.
Yeah.
Now, this is really simple. If you create value, they will come back. Yeah. If they don't come back, that means that you don't create value. As simple as that.
That's really interesting. Going back to, again, because we work with a lot of tech entrepreneurs, some software and some hardware, and many come with the solution rather than the problem. Or they create a technology, or they have an idea that works for them. How do you describe in the book a market of one?
Yeah, an amazing sample of one person.
Yeah. So that's the value thing, I think, is clear, because again, something might work and it might be useful and it might have a use case, but it's not necessarily creating value. And that's the big difference between a successful company and another, I think, or one of them.
Right. And then I would say, you know what? Just simply change it the other way around. Start with realizing what is the value. And the simplest way to create value is solve a problem. And this is why, I call this book Fall in Love with the Problem and not the Solution. Because when you focus on the problem and then you start with the problem, and then you go and speak with people that you believe that actually have the same problem, and you try to get their perspective of the problem.
Yeah.
And only then you go and build the solution. If you follow this path and your solution works, it's guaranteed that you're creating value. But it's also going to serve you as two main other goals. One of them is that if you focus on the problem would be the North Star of your journey. And when you have a North Star, you're simply going to make less deviations from the course.
Yeah.
And the story that you're going to tell is going to be way more compelling, right? Because if I will be here in 2007 and I will tell you, I'm going to build an AI crowdsource-based navigation system, and you're going to say, oh, yeah, it's really interesting. But you don't care.
Yeah.
If I'll tell you I'm going to help you to avoid traffic jams, then you do care.
Yeah.
And this is the difference between a problem-based story and a solution-based story.
Yeah. One of the challenges, I think, when you start, you have an idea, you think you find a problem and you want to solve it. So you speak to people around you, and my experience is directly and indirectly through people I speak to. Sometimes you speak to people who are wanting to make you feel good. So they'll say, yeah, great idea, and do that. Or others around your family think, oh, that's scary. Don't do that. That will never work. And you've obviously experienced, I guess, or come across founders who have had both of these. How do you get to a validation of your idea from early stages when you're not just talking to your friends and family?
So a lot of entrepreneurs ask me, so how many people do I need to speak to? And the answer is 100.
Okay.
And then they ask me why. And I say, because I don't want you, if I'll tell you 10, then you're going to speak to your 5 close friends and to your parents and to your, brother and sister, and this is it, and you're done. No, you're not done.
Yeah.
You need to actually basically say, the problem I'm trying to solve, these are the type of people that actually have that. And then speak with 10 different people in each one of those types that you just described. Right?
Okay.
Because only then you will get validation. Now, the reality is that this will never happen, right? Because if this problem is real, the first 10 people will actually give you the validation. This is going to be persistent.
Yeah.
If the problem is not real, then this is where your problem starts, right? Because then people will tell you, yeah, you know what, it's nice. Yeah. And nice means that don't do it, right?
Yeah.
And the reality is that what you'll try to do is that, if you already think that this is what you're going to do, then you're going to ignore that. Then you're going to say, these these people don't know.
Exactly. There's a problem sometimes. A lot of entrepreneurs, particularly tech entrepreneurs and hardware in particular, very smart guys and girls, right? Very, very smart individuals. And sometimes because of that, you have some sense of ego that says, I'm not, these people are wrong. Because we all hear of, Steve Jobs and the thing about, or even Ford, people would have asked for a faster force kind of thing. And just focus on, this is a great idea because I'm a great individual. But that's such a risky path. Maybe one or two, maybe make it through, but really without that validation.
There were so many people that told me that this will never work. But it's not that they didn't they didn't think that the solution would work, but they definitely wanted me to be successful because I was solving the real problem for them. The same, by the way, with Elon Musk, right? So many people told him that he's crazy and this will never work. And I think that over the years we realized that he is actually the greatest entrepreneur of the century, right?
Yeah.
And the same with Steve Jobs back then, and the same with anyone that makes significant changes. It was the same. Mark Randolph, co-founder of Netflix, actually wrote a book saying that this will never work, right?
Right.
And I can tell you that I heard that so many times. And these were the nice guys, like the lesser nicer guys. They will tell you this is the stupidest idea that they ever heard. But the reality is that what you're trying to validate is not whether or not you should go into this journey, whether or not they care about the problem. Because if they do, then they're still not going to believe you that this is going to work. But then you actually have a very good reason to go into this journey.
Another thing around coach, when you're starting those early days, even if you're focused on the problem, you're working out how to take something to market, how to fix the problem, how to solve the problem. Very early on, you're talking again around customer experience and the whole way through the journey about the customer experience and retention, as you touched on, which is ultimately the success. But so often businesses focus on the solution, the hardware, the software that solves the problem, rather than the customer feedback. And I think, from what I've experienced and seen from reading your book, that accelerates your growth, the constant listening to your customers.
Of course it does, because then you actually building the right stuff, right? So let's take an example of, features, right? So most people would think that the product is going to become better if we will add more features. And no, the answer is that the product will become better if you simplify it. And Leonardo da Vinci said that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication, right? Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and you want people to use that now. Here is your biggest challenge, right? Man, you already familiar with the product, with the value proposition, with how to use that, and when you think about the next users that you're going to have, this next user, it's the first time that they're going to face your product.
Yeah.
And they not necessarily know even why they're trying that way. So this is first-time user experience. This is your product manager or your product lead or your CEO. It's not the first time. And it's like the first keys, right? You cannot experience the first-time user experience again. That's it.
Yeah.
There is only once. And if they will find out that this is complex, their state of mind is very simple. You know what? I was doing fine until now. And I will keep on doing fine if I'm not using it, right?
Yeah.
And if this is too complex, then what happens is actually it serves you the other way around, right? Rather than people will basically say, I'll figure that out, they will say, wait a minute, this is too complex. I feel like an idiot. I don't like to feel like an idiot, so I'm going to give up on that. Right. And that's it.
Yeah. Another challenge I think comes across, and you touched again in the book and with your experience, sometimes internationalization quite early is a good thing because of the market fit and the dynamics of different markets. But also sometimes adding geographies or adding features, both can be a distraction from the goal.
So look, there is a chapter in my book that is called Going Global. And the funny part is that I wrote this chapter and then I removed it. And then I wrote it again and removed it again. And the reason is that this might be irrelevant in some cases and it's completely irrelevant in some other cases, right? So if you start your startup in Israel, which is a small place, or here in Prague, right? There are 10.5 million people here in Prague. That in Czech Republic, that's it. And and even if you take Slovakia as part of it, then it's still a small place, right? And so you will need to become global very fast. If you start in the US, by the time that you will need to think about going global, it's going to be 5, 6, 7, 8 years down the road, and you are either already market leader, and your globalization strategy could be based by raising tons of money and doing acquisitions everywhere, or brute force with money everywhere. Or if you're not market leader, then it doesn't make any difference. And so what you will likely to see is that startup that starts in a small place, they will become global faster. Whereas startup that starts in a large market, they will focus on the market first, and this is the right thing to do. Now, if you're starting in a small place and you would ask me what's your globalization strategy, then I would say, I want you to think of a significant enough market that is easy to win. And that might be surprising market for you, right? So US is definitely a significant market, but it's not easy to win.
No, it's tough.
And UK is a pretty significant market, but it's not easy to win either, right? It might be Brazil, it might be Indonesia, it might be Mexico, it might be Turkey, it might be Southern Europe, Spain or Italy. It might be emerging markets that are easier to win because there is no competition there.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you think of Waze and you say, okay, this is very successful in the US. And yes, of course it is, because there are more, drivers, more cars in the US than any other markets. But then you ask yourself, okay, and what is the second market? Brazil. And the third one, India. And the fourth one, Indonesia. Because there are 480 million people in Indonesia, right? We just don't think about it as a market.
What's covered? It's interesting, yeah, because sometimes I think people do it from ego. And of course the US is the big shiny thing, and if you get that, then clearly it's a big difference. But as you say, it's a lot of competition, a lot of hard work too.
It's you will need a lot of resources in order to become successful there, right? So occasionally people would say, you know what, I have a couple of millions of dollars and I'm going to make it to the US, and based on that I will be able to raise capital in the US. The reality is that you're not going to create any traction there, and then you'll fail to raise money there because you have no traction, right? You just demonstrated to investors that it's not worthwhile to invest, right?
Yeah.
But if you'll be able to create traction in someplace else, then you might be able to get funded and then go to the...
Yeah, traction, so true. I'm conscious of time. One of the things I did want to cover with, because I'm quite passionate about culture within businesses, and one of the things I thought was quite interesting and was around the fire first the focus on fire rather than hire. Clearly get hiring is a critical part of the process, but I absolutely agree. Firing people or moving people along early can make a big difference. That's something which, again, maybe you get some resistance from, because it sounds sometimes a little harsh, but the reality is sometimes you have the wrong people on the bus, right?
So it's there is a chapter in my book that called Firing and Hiring, and when I approached different publisher, they told me it should be hiring and firing, and I said, no, firing is a hard decision. Hiring is easy decision. You should know how to make hard decisions, and it's coming from a perspective that I've developed over the years when I spoke with entrepreneurs, and I spoke with many entrepreneurs that their startup failed, and asked them why, what happened. And about half told me the team was not right. And I kept on asking, okay, what do you mean the team was not right? And so I heard, we had this guy not good enough, and this guy, so not good enough was main reason. Another reason that I heard quite often is that we had a communication issue, right? Something that I actually called ego management.
Right, yeah.
And then ask them the most scarier questions. When did you know that the team is not right? All of them knew within the first month. So the first month, everyone knew that the team is not right, and said, wait a minute. If you knew within the first month that the team is not right and you didn't do anything, the problem was not that the team was not right. The problem was that the CEO did not make hard decisions.
Right.
Making hard decisions is hard. Making easy decisions is easy. This is why in a small organization like a startup, they expect the CEO to make those hard decisions. They would go all the way to the top. Now, if the one in the top doesn't make those hard decisions, the result is always going to be the same.
Yeah, A players would always leave if they don't have
top-performing people. They would leave.
Yeah.
Now, the problem, and this is what amplifies the issue, is it's a small team, right? It's a small organization. Just imagine every small organization that you were there throughout your entire career. And if there is someone that shouldn't be there, everyone knows. Everyone knows, and the CEO doesn't do anything. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
And the conclusion of this chapter is actually very simple. Every time that you hire a new person, mark your calendars for 30 days down the road and ask yourself one question. Knowing what I know today, would I hire this person?
Yeah.
Now, if the answer is yes, then this is absolutely amazing. Then you should go to this person and tell them that you are very happy with the decision to hire them and they are exceeding your expectation. And if you can give them something as a token of appreciation, this would be a good time, maybe additional equity or something. But if the answer is no, then you should fire them immediately. And the reason is that everyone knows. And so you're doing the rest of the team a favor, you're doing yourself a favor, and you are doing that person a favor.
Yeah.
Because that person is not going to be successful. You already set the trajectory that they shouldn't be there.
Yeah.
And they deserve to be successful, even though that it's going to be someplace else.
Yeah.
Now, the longer that you wait, it's going to become harder and harder and harder. And when I ask my CEOs, when did you decide to fire, one of the management team? All of them told me, too late.
Too late, absolutely. Yeah. We get caught in often when these things happen. I think one of the caveats in that also is, again, it's around having the right onboarding, for when someone joins, giving them the tools and resources and the onboarding so that they can be of their best. And sometimes I think companies acquire, so much like an acquisition, sometimes companies make an acquisition and then don't know what to do with it. And I think sometimes people hire talent and then don't necessarily know how to do with it. That's not saying that we shouldn't get rid of them, but sometimes that's, again, an issue in the hiring process or an issue with CEOs.
So occasionally you would say the person is the right person, but as an organization, we don't know what to do with it.
Right.
Same cop.
Yeah. But still, they shouldn't necessarily be on the bus.
So let's say that you're trying to hire, VP sales, and you bring an amazing person, but you haven't figured out product market fit yet. So you expect them to sell, but you don't have anything to sell yet. That person is going to be very frustrated.
Yeah.
So it will be better off to actually fire that person, even though that this is an amazing performing person.
Yeah. Sometimes it's a timing thing rather than individual, right?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm just conscious that I think we're running a little bit short on time. What's next for you, Uri? Obviously, you've got the book. You're obviously keen to share that with the community. You've obviously got other entrepreneurial activities going on. What does the next few years look like for you?
So, I have about 10 different startups that I coach and mentor the CEOs and guide, and some of them are going to become very successful. And, statistically, when you think of this world, and you will realize that not all of them, but this is part of the game. And so this is my, highest priority, promoting the book, because I think this is going to end up with a bigger impact on the world. At the end of the day, you look at all the innovations that were done in the last 50 years, and you go back to the beginning and you say, wait a minute, all of them started because of an entrepreneur that was there at the beginning. So if we can increase their likelihood of being successful, we are actually going to bring the world to become a better place faster.
Yeah.
And that's about the book. And, I speak at different events for that. And that's about it. Now I'm helping my startups. I'm, occasionally building investment vehicles that will help them to become more successful. And that's what I foresee for the next few years.
Yeah, it's that level of entrepreneurship. I read something the other day. I'm not sure if it's exact statistics, but essentially like entrepreneurs are 3% of the population, but they create 7% of the jobs.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, and there is more into that, right? Because at the end of the day, when you think about, really, you go into the top 10 companies of the world today, and except Apple and Microsoft, that they are almost 50 years old, everyone else is less than 30. And Aramco is different, right? But everyone else is less than 30 years old, right? They started by an entrepreneur that is still a young person.
Yeah.
That's the amazing part of it.
It's a beautiful thing. So listen, do get the book. We'll make sure on the episode page that there's links to the book. It is fantastic. Obviously, you can catch up with Uri on various platforms as well. We're sending some links to on the episode page to his own website. But Uri, it's been brilliant to meet with you. Thanks for sharing your thoughts.
Thank you.